Hey, Ted McClyman here. This Facebook Live is in response to a couple of questions I've had on the discussion group about what's going on with the finances, primarily to uh, baby boomers retire, and really in a direct response to a post I put up or a link to an article from Forbes, which was entitled. Forbes article said 8 ways the C-19 virus will dramatically alter baby boomer retirement. And that led into just a general question is what's the impact on our finances? Well, to begin with, I don't know. Unlike some other talking heads and people that tend to be able to predict categorically what's going to happen in the future, particularly in economics, I don't pretend to be able to do that. And I don't think anybody else can. And I think that's very important. However, I can talk about indications, I can talk about indicators, and what I know and write about with regard to human behavior. Because economics and finance is all about human behavior, emotions in particular. So the Forbes article listed 8 items. I'm going to go through these real quick, and then I'm going to get into my thoughts on where I think we're going, particularly with regard to my work and research over the last few years on people and money, money and people, and the behavioral aspect of what we're doing. Now, what's really kind of cool about all this, not many people are talking about money from a behavioral perspective. Everybody seems to immediately go right into the technical aspects of money. And to be very candid, most people just shut down when they start hearing this stuff. So to begin with, highly recommend that you go to my website, tedmcclyman.com, and take the free course. The free course is a quick way to get up to speed on the concepts I write about, the elements of the book, and to get you basically on the same plane as me as when I'm using terms like feeling brain, thinking brain, and the like. There's also a link to download the introduction to the book, Discover Your Money Temperament, which is the basis for just about everything I talk about here. Now, obviously, I'd recommend you read the book. It's not required for some that we're going to be doing here, but it'll help you understand much better where I'm coming from and what I'm looking at. So to begin with, first question was in the Forbes article, younger boomers will fall behind. What we're implying there is because of an economic slowdown, it's going to put a limit and it's going to put a bit of constraints in what the younger boomers are going to be able to accumulate. Obviously, the drop in returns are going to have an impact, but I think that's fairly obvious. Another phenomena that has been happening is the phenomena of people working longer. Forbes says it's going to be more difficult. I am not convinced that's the case. When we say more difficult, what they're implying is the structural changes in the economy as a result of what's going on right now means there'll be fewer opportunities. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Panic will doom boomers' wealth. Now, here's something I can get my head around, and we're seeing this right now. We've had about a 30% correction in the market, and a lot of that correction was a result of boomers actually panicking, taking all their money out of the market and going to cash or gold or celebrity plates for all I know, and that's probably short-sighted. Now, the first thing I tell you, if you're involved in any type of investment, I'm not giving you investment advice. What you do is totally up to you. All I know is you don't take a loss or take a gain until you actually sell something. And if you sell on emotions or buy on emotions, it usually ends badly. So I highly, highly recommend you work with a professional, somebody who's an accountability coach, preferably licensed, that has your interest at hand, that can help you better understand the impact and the ramifications of purchases and sales, and more importantly, understand what you own and why you own it. So obviously we've seen panic selling, and that is a reality. And as long as that natural panic is in the market, it's going to have a negative impact. Now, there's some other things in the article that are a little bit more obvious. A lot of boomers are going to change their bucket list. Less cruising, less travel on abandonment, probably more quality time with families. It'll probably have a tremendous impact on our nursing home and assisted care industry. And finally, we're probably going to see it's going to have some impact on how we think about policy and what is right for the country. So, okay, so much for that article. Let me get into really what my thoughts are what we're really talking about when we're talking about money, the panic that we're going through right now. And this is international because when we're talking about behavior with people, it's universal because we're human. The behavior may be tempered or different from country to country because of belief sets, the environment, where you live and work and learn how to spend, and the culture. But fundamentally, the basic biological elements are universal. First and foremost, what we need to understand is our feeling thinking brain. Most of our time is in what I call our feeling brain, and our feeling brain is really designed to keep us alive. So a lot of what happens with regard to our finance comes down to two things: hope, fear. You hope things are going to go well. That's the happy side. Fear something's going to happen. You're protecting yourself. But if you realize that your brain is designed to keep you alive and pass on your genes, then this becomes a very, very Darwinian or approach to you're going to always look at things from Maslow's hierarchy, if you will. Maslow, scientist that basically says when things get tough, preservation is the number one behavior that we're moving towards. When things are nice, that's self-actuation and the like. But the bottom line is, when things are rough, there's a piece in our brain, the amygdala, which is the natural fear response center, and it starts pumping things through our body, and fear becomes the driver. And when we're afraid, we sometimes do very, very crazy things. Then another part of that, and you got to remember that traditional finance doesn't do a lot of the behavioral stuff. Traditional finance assumes that you're rational, that you do a cost-benefit analysis, that you look at a problem, that you sit down and you run the numbers. And when you run the numbers, you're going to have perfect information that you're going to react in a very analytical, linear way. Well, the reality is our brains are not computers. We think imperfectly. We store information in an associative manner. And Dr. Famous geneticist and biogeneticist by the name of Damasio wrote a really, really good book. And in it, he basically brings up the concept, he calls it sonomic markers. And what he basically says is that in our lives, when we have a significant emotional event, it leaves a touchstone or a marker for which we go back to and use that as a reference point for decision making. So if you grew up like my dad did in the Depression, that emotional experience is his touchstone with regard to money. So with regard to what we're going through right now, what we're seeing is this will create an emotional touchdown for millions of people. And it will impact their decision making with regard to money, jobs, and the like for the foreseeable future. We are emotional animals. And the emotions of what are going on around us will impact our decision making in the future. That also means that where you are, the situation you're facing, the people around you, the environment will in fact impact that biological marker, will in fact have a tremendous impact on how you process information about money in the future. I apologize, you might hear my dogs in the background. I'm going to shut the door just a second. There we go. This is why they call this Facebook Live. Okay, so What we need to look at, number one, is the biology. What makes us tick? And I would recommend, as you're sitting down and you're looking through your finances right now and your relationship, look at it from a behavioral perspective, not an analytical financial perspective. First, look at our biology. Next, it's the belief sets. The belief sets are how do you naturally think and feel about money? And that's a function of, again, where you grew up, your relationship with money, your good experiences, your bad experience, and that's going to unconsciously bias the decision making you take, and obviously your culture. Culture has a tremendous impact on how you think and feel about money, what you think is important, how you make your buying decisions, and what gives you the emotional feedback that you made a very, very good decision. That's important. Um, let's get into something a little bit deeper, though. Let's talk about the structural changes in the economy as a result of this. And I think this is going to be very, very, very significant. Number one is technology. We're doing what we're doing here today because of technology. 5 years ago, we couldn't do a Facebook Live. It was impossible. 10 years ago, the information we're talking about here would have taken weeks to get out to your household to give you an opportunity to make some decisions. And one of the things I'm probably most impressed about with the impact of technology is how it is changing not only the way we're responding to this crisis, but also the opportunity. Let's talk for a couple how this technology change and the structural transformation in our economy will have an impact in a way we can't even imagine. Let's talk about what we're doing right now. I have the potential from my office to speak to literally millions of people around the world, not only live, but also in a delayed fashion. This technology will create hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of jobs around this basic technology. We have hundreds of millions of kids right now around the world that are learning to go to school from home. We may find out in our economy that there's going to be structural pressure to change the concept of education. In the United States, I believe our education model is still pretty much a post-World War II model that was designed to teach people how to work in very traditional industries, primarily manufacturing. And it was designed in such a way that you were rewarded for your command of information, your ability to regurgitate that information, not necessarily perform. And it was thought that being in a captured environment with a teacher up front was the best way to learn. Well, I'll tell you categorically, it was my experience in the Marine Corps, that's necessarily the case, that distant learning and other forms of learning can be as or even more effective, particularly if we start understanding that people learn differently and that there are different ways to offer learning. So I do believe that there's going to be a tremendous opportunity for new jobs, new technologies that are going to come out of this in the medical community, transportation and logistics, information processing, education, not only at the secondary level, but also at the college level. I think there are going to be a number of universities that are charging thousands, even hundreds of $1,000s for the privilege to go through their institution, are going to find out over the next year to 18 months that that experience can be duplicated very nicely online like we're doing right now. So think about that. The other thing I think we need to be aware of is we're going to define the concept of work. When we talk about work, what it meant 20 years ago is very different than what it means today. Unless you're in the hands-on manufacturing side, you're probably in the business of processing information. Okay, the business I'm in is solving problems. I solve problems using my intellectual capital to give you information that you may not have been aware of. Because of the nature of what I do, I literally can run my entire business from my phone. I have a reach and scale that I never had before. So I think for a lot of folks, particularly folks that are being sent home to work from home, that they're going to discover a couple of different things. Number one, that it's a new way of developing teams, to developing work, developing problem solving skills, and the traditional concept of the work environment may evolve radically once we get through this little exercise. It also means that work in some industries will be greatly decentralized. If we determine that having large concentrations in large brick and mortar buildings can be a health hazard, the natural response is to decentralize. The best way to decentralize is to use technology. Now, obviously, we are herding animals. We like to be together. There's going to have to be a way to offer some type of bonding experience and building the loyalty and the esprit of the corporation. The best way you can do that is meeting people in real life. But the reality is, we as humans, and if we use the current technology like I have here and the evolving technology, which is only going to be better, we can build relationships. We can build lasting relationships that are emotional and they work. Give you a case in point. I've got a business partner, or a couple of business partners out in San Diego that we've been doing work for a number of years, and I've never physically met them. We met on LinkedIn. We started a company. We started doing things. Now we're passing information. We're an information-based company, but the point is there has not been a need to have the traditional face-to-face, grip and grin type meeting. As a matter of fact, those types of meetings are incredibly inefficient. We do everything online, and it's working wonderfully. So when we're talking about structural change, technology is going to be a driver here. It's going to have a tremendous impact. And I believe, and I've seen through the years, that when there's stress in the economy or our culture, and we turn to technology for solutions, and I use World War II, World War I, other conflicts as an example, that technology rapidly is employed. It is then moved into the economy, and smart people take that technology and move it in ways we never envisioned to do great things. So I see some real opportunities for people that are on the ball and they move forward. The next side of there is the whole concept of decentralization and what it means to work is, when I talk to people about retirement, let's talk about retirement planning for a second. And this is not going to be about your 401k or anything like that. This is just the whole concept of retirement. Number one, the concept of retirement we have in America, and it's an old concept that goes back really to the 50s and 60s, where for some reason we decided that in America you retire at 62 to 65. And it assumed also that you'd have this very traditional job experience. You probably have some kind of pension. You've got some benefits. You've got savings. You have a life insurance policy. You live in a house that's paid for, and your family and support systems within walking distance. Well, that hasn't happened since Leave It to Beaver went off TV. In my years of working with clients, building retirement systems, the last time I saw somebody that fell into that was probably about 20 years ago. And at that time, I dealt with somebody that was getting ready to retire. They were in their early 60s, maybe mid 60s. They smoke a little too much. They probably drank a little too much. And back then, the goal was to build a financial plan that would give them an extra couple $100 a month to see them through the difference between Social Security, their pension, and their savings. And in most cases, we were talking about, at best, 10 years worth of life. Well, that has fundamentally changed. When I talk to people now, we've got blended families and non-traditional families and mixed families, and people are spread all over the United States. But more importantly, the concept of work is not what it was with their parents. Most people don't have a pension. You have a 401k, which is your responsibility. Benefits are iffy. And because of mobility in the workplace, a lot of people have not been in place long enough to be vested to have enough money to make a difference. Then you factor on that the lifestyle decisions a lot of people are making. They're living today at the expense of tomorrow. But the most significant change is longevity. It was one thing to build a financial plan that had to last 5 to 6 years. It's a completely different nut to crack when that financial plan has to last 20 or 30 years. Okay, let me say that again. The average person has to plan on being in retirement for up to 30 years. That's unheard of. And most people have a mindset of their parents or grandparents when it comes to retirement planning, and they don't think they're going to need the money. So that is one thing I highly recommend that you get your head around, that you've got to look at retirement, you've got to look at work from a very, very different perspective. So here's my advice. Number one, everybody is self-employed. Everybody. Whether you know it or not, you are self-employed. What does that mean? That means you are absolutely accountable and responsible for the decisions you take and the resulting outcome. As a self-employed person, and that could be working for the federal government or having your own business, you are self-employed. It means that you are totally at the mercy of changes in technology. If you think about it, a technology change could have a significant impact on your job or your business. You need to be aware of that. A social change could have an impact on your job or your business. And what we're seeing right now, a what we call a black swan, an unforeseen event that has a significant impact that was not anticipated, could put you out of business. So as a self-employed person, you need the mindset of a CEO. You are the CEO of you. And as the CEO of you, you need to start making decisions in that context. And it means that you need to be prepared with a couple of scenarios that you could be out of business at any time, that your supply chain could be disrupted, that changes in the marketplace could impact your business. And if you're the CEO of you, you take very proactive steps to prepare for that. Probably the most important is keeping yourself current in your profession, being open to learning new things and constantly improving. Then realize that the concept of retirement, as I'm talking about it, is going to be different for you now than it was for your parents, for sure. Now let's talk about the retirement transition for a minute. Now, again, I don't like the term retirement. I don't think people retire anymore. I think what they do is they transition during different phases of their life to doing different things. It may be going from a full-time job to a part-time job. It may be pursuing a completely different career. It may be starting and joining the gig economy. It doesn't matter. What it means, though, is I think the days are over with where you hit 65, go to your recliner, spend the rest of your life flipping through 150 cable TV channels, and then die in your sleep in about 4 or 5 years. That's not a really good solution. It's not realistic. Longevity is the key. Remember that. And if you're going to be happy in that period of space longevity, I think you have to stay active. Activity means mental activity and also physical activity. If you're not active, everything atrophies and everything stops. So how do you support yourself during this period of time? You need to have a plan. And that plan has to start as early as possible. Now, there are 3 things you need to be aware of when it comes to taking or earning money or making your money work for you and your investment side. It takes time, money, and rate of return. Time you have limited control over. You choose to start early or start late, but you have time to work with. Obviously, the sooner you start, that means you can have your money work for you longer at lower risk, and the compounding effect is magic. You have to have some money. You have to make some decisions, regardless of your station in life, to give up a little bit today to have a lot more today in the future. Delayed gratification is a term you've heard forever. Pay yourself first. I don't care how you do it, but you have to realize that the dollar you spend today is not a dollar you're going to have in the future to take care of those needs and those lifestyles that you're hoping to have if you squander that opportunity now. The next part is rate of return. Rate of return is nothing more than what you can expect to earn when you put your money into an investment, a market, or whatever. And for assuming a degree of risk, you are compensated for that. Now, here's something I want to share with you that I find is very, very disturbing for most of the financial community. And most people who are investors that I know, particularly that do it themselves, they spend all their time and effort chasing rate of return at the expense of time and money, and they usually fail miserably. Here's something that you need to lock down. You have no control as an individual over the rate of return of any class of investment. The only thing you can control is yourself. Your human capital, what you're good at, what you can do, your time in the market, the money you have in the market. You can't determine what the price of a house is. You can't determine what that market's going to look like. You can't determine or impact the rate of return. All you can do is decide to be involved, which means be invested, and hopefully be in the right mix of investments to make this thing work. And that's a personal decision, which I recommend you work with a professional. But here's the kicker. Time, money, rate of return are the classic formula for generating wealth. And true wealth is what you have left after taxes and expenses to do what you want to do with. Okay, for the average American, true wealth is a myth. They don't have it. But the denominator you need to work with is behavior. Behavior is the piece you have to get under control, which means you need to understand what makes you tick. And if you got a spouse, partner, kids, or whatever, you need to know what makes them tick, because your behavior is going to determine how you handle that time question, how you handle that money question, and how you handle that rate of return question. It doesn't matter the solution or strategy you take, but you have to understand that the behavior is the thing you must understand first and the piece you must control. If you don't do it, I believe you will fail. Next, the environment that we're going to see in the next few years, and this is the political environment. And when I say political involvement, I'm not going to be political in the sense that one team is better than the other team. I'm just saying that I think we're going to see some changes once we pull out of the Q19 or the C19 hoorah, and it's going to have, I think, a real impact on some of our basic institutions. Over the last few years, we've had a real trend to move towards driving people to metropolitan areas, higher concentrations, move them to the city, and the like. I think there's going to be some pushback with that. I think after people realize if they've spent a great hunkered down in a large metropolitan area, that maybe spending all your time in an apartment in a city may not what we want to do. So I think there may be a conflict there between those that are trying to move towards greater centralization, and there's going to be pushback with people who want less centralization. We need to talk about that a little bit. I think that trend will be there. And we've also seen a very fundamental difference between the concept of centralized control versus decentralized control. And if you're watching what's happening with the response to the virus right now, you're seeing this play out in some interesting ways. There's some people are pushing for everything to happen to the federal government, but we're seeing that the federal government is responding in some ways from a centralized control perspective, but from other ways, they're pushing things out in a very decentralized way and through a cooperation and a group effort through both private industry and government control. So I don't know where that's going to go, but that's going to be a significant change over the next couple of years. So let's wrap this up a couple of minutes very quickly. When we're talking about The impact of your finances over the next couple of years, I really don't know what's going to happen, and I don't pretend to know. What I do know is to prepare for what's happening now and over the next couple of years with money. I think the first thing you have to do is benchmark who you are, what makes you tick, and your relationship with money. What is important about money to you? What is the essence that you tick with money? What is the value set? What's important to you? Then you need to sit down and look around and determine whether your value set with money is aligned with the people you care about around you, but also aligned with any plan you have in place. Next thing you have to do is determine how you naturally think and feel about money. I call that your money temperament. How do you like to spend money? How do you like to save money? What's your anxiety level in markets? Once you determine what that is, that's going to have a tremendous impact on the strategy you put together. Your strategy must reflect and be aligned with how you naturally think and feel of money. And if you're in a family, you're probably going to find that there's a disconnect quite often. You need to get that resolved. If you have a plan that you neither understand nor is suited for you, it's doomed for failure. That's why I believe so many people have trouble with traditional financial planning approaches. It's all about the technology. It's all about the numbers. It's all about the stuff. It's all about the product. The product will have no bearing on you unless first you own it, second you understand it, and third you let that product do what it's designed to do. That's something most humans are have a great deal of discomfort accomplishing. So, as you put it together, and we're going to wrap this up real quick, recommend you sit down and really benchmark who you are and what makes you tick with money. There will be significant financial ramifications with this whole exercise with the C19 virus. It's going to have an impact on you emotionally. It'll have an impact on the folks you care about. It will have an impact on your concept of work. It will have an impact on our concept of education and training. It will have an impact on how we use and leverage technology. That's inevitable. How it will impact you to a large extent depends on how you adapt and interpret what's going on. And again, I think that starts with knowing who you are, what makes you tick, and how you naturally think and feel about money. So I don't know if this helped. I see we've got a couple comments here, and I think I must be successful. I've angered at least one person. That's important. But I encourage you to join in on this thing. You know, post some questions. I don't have all the answers, but I'll take a shot at it. But more importantly, I'd like you to get involved. If you've got some questions, you've got some concerns, let me know. Either put them here, or give me a direct message. My job, as far as I'm concerned, is to help you make better money decisions by helping you better understand how you naturally think and feel about money, how you make your decisions, and then the consequences of those choices. So I'll be back again at some time in the future. You have a great day. Enjoy your life in the bunker. I believe that this will be over sooner than we think, and it'll put us in a position to absolutely move into the next phase, which is looking for the good and driving forward. So, talk to you later.